Living my bucolic life, free, healthy city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and sew and spin, move the horses into the barn, then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Good morning, welcome back for another project. This time we're going to be making these fun, huge, ginormous pants. And yeah, they look huge, but they have an extremely high waist, and my waist, I usually have to make an adjustment to get a higher waist. And looking at the pattern, I'm not going to make the adjustment. I'm just going to go for it and see how it goes. We'll see. I think that there's enough because of the extreme height of this waistband here that I'm going to be able to make it work. Now you see there's a whole bunch of pleats here in the front. That's fun. In the back, it is pretty standard, just a dart, you know, over each one. So I think that that will be good. The fabric that I'm using is an extremely lightweight, somewhere around an olive green colored baby corduroy. Okay, I think that it is opaque enough that, you know, it'll hide everything in the backside, but light enough that I'll be able to get all of those pleats in the front and not have it be too bulky. That's my goal. So yeah, let me go ahead and get started cutting out. So this is my front piece here, extremely wide. It takes the entire width of my 45 or 44 inch wide fabric folded in half all the way edge to edge. But I am going to be shortening it a bit because, you know, I'm not as tall as their models. I'm going to be taking 3 inches off. So what I'm going to do is down here where the double line is, that's their lengthen and shorten here code. So I put my little ruler there, fold it up. So I have this crease line, and then put my ruler so the edge is at 1.5 inches, and fold it back down along that crease line, and that's going to give me my 3 inch shortening, you know, because 1.5 inches and 1.5 inches is 3 inches. So I'll go ahead and put a piece of tape here. I'll do the same thing for the back pant piece so that they'll be the same, obviously. And right now I think that's the only modifications I'm making. And yes, I'm still using this tape, this cursed tape. I will be getting some Scotch tape at some point when I remember. I always forget when I'm at the store. I need to make a note. So I wanted to mention before I forgot that yes, I am using corduroy. So because corduroy has a nap, it has a definite direction. It's important that on all the pieces I cut out that are going to be visible, which are my 2 main pieces, the pocket side piece, the waistband pieces, I need to make sure I lay them all out so that they have the same top. You know, not putting any of them upside down, because that'll change the entire look and shade of green that my fabric is. And, you know, no one wants that as a distraction on top of everything else. But yeah, that's true for corduroy and any other napped fabric. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is mark the dart in my back. And I had to unpin and move around because I need to make sure I mark this dart on the wrong side of my fabric, and I had it pinned so the right side was showing. So I'm just going to do these one at a time. So like usual, what I have done, hang on, let me stick a pin here so my paper does not want to move. Okay, so like what I have done, like usual, is for my size, I have a scrap of leather that I put between the tissue paper and my fabric, and I have a little hole punch. And what I do is punch out the hole for the size that I'm going to be using. I did that for all of the little holes there off camera because, like I said, I had it placed wrong. And then with a heat erasable pen, I'm going to be using blue this time. I can just come back in and color inside all of those little holes that I just punched out. So now I'm going to play dot to dot here and just connect all of these dots so I have a nice clear stitching line when I go to sew my dart. So I'm going to be putting my dart in, and then after my dart is in, then I'm going to run stay stitching. I think that makes more sense to me than doing it the other way around. So the way that I make my dart is I put my pin down in the first dot, up in the second dot. Do the same thing with the next one down in the first dot, up in the second dot. So it looks like that. And then at the very tip, you can see right here is the little tip of my dart. I'm going to pinch that and push these pins all the way through. And that's going to give me the fold line for my dart, okay? So let me go ahead and put a pin down here at the very bottom. Lock this one in, lock this one in, and I'm actually going to put one, since this is kind of a long stretch, halfway here. When I go to sew it, I start at the top, and I have my stitching line I can follow now, and I sew all the way along it to the very bottom. The instructions are going to, emphatically tell you do not back stitch your dart at the very tip. I, however, am going to back stitch my dart at the very tip. But if you're going to do that, make sure that when you come down your regular stitching at the angle, when you go to back stitch it, go more towards the edge of the fold. Okay, if that makes sense. So if you come stitching down this way, don't back stitch that way. Kind of turn your fabric a little bit so you're back stitching more along the fold line. That way you don't add any bulk. So I need to go change the thread on my sewing machine and get both of these darts sewn in first. So over here at my ironing board, I have it stitched. So the first thing I do is iron it flat using enough steam, that it's going to relax all of those fibers, make everything happy, and it erases my mark, okay? Then I need to press my seam allowance towards my center back. So now that this is pressed flat, it's a lot easier just to push it over to the side. And yes, you can iron corduroy. It's perfectly fine, I'm not pushing down super hard, but I am ironing it, and it'll work out well. So now on this side, here's my dart. It's all made. Now this point right here is what they're considering the waistline, okay? All of this is upper waist decorativeness, okay? So if you see, and it looks like there's like a little crease here, that's because that's where that angle changes. So now that I have it pressed on the inside, I can press the outside. Now up here, I need to run a row of stay stitching straight across, which I will run at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, just a straight stitch all the way across. Once I have that done, I'm going to go ahead and serge around the entire piece with black thread, just because it's black or white around here, and the same thing with the other pant leg. Actually, I wanted to point out I'm not serging across the top, because this is going to be encased in the waistband, but the sides and the bottom I am, because I do not want fraying. And once again, when I serge, I just go right along the very edge, barely cutting off anything, just to encase it, to clean it up, to make sure that it's nice and neat and won't be fraying. So anyhow, these two pieces are done. Okay, so now onto the front piece, which has a whole bunch of pleats I need to mark. So just to have a slight conversation about heat erasable pens. When I am marking pleats, I mark pleats on the right side of the fabric. It's easier to deal with that way. And because I'm on the right side of the fabric, I want to make sure that whatever my marking system is, that it will come off easily enough. You know, you want it so you can see it, but you also don't want it to stay forever. So I usually test it on a scrap of fabric, which I did. I drew several lines on this fabric, you know, going the same way that I would up here. And when I ironed it, I think this is partly because with corduroy, when you have any kind of pressure, that pressure shows, like when I serge, I have it over there, but when I serge, you can kind of see the track where the pressure of the presser foot goes. But here's my thing. In my experience with heat erasable pens, and this is just my experience, you do you, any residual that's on here will come out at the first time I wash the fabric, okay? That, in addition to the fact that when I fold on that line that I mark and then move it over, I'm going to have a fold right there. So any little mark that I have on the very outside edge is basically going to blend in and disappear. So with that all being said, yes, when I iron it flat, yes, you'll be able to see a little bit of where this is. I don't think it's going to last forever, and I think once I fold my pleats it will disappear, and the ease of using it way makes up for, you know, any other issue. So with all of that being said, there is a whole lot that we need to mark on the pants here. So on the fly, they're going to have a stitching line for the fly, which you only mark on the left side. You do not mark that on the right side. And because where I mark it, I will be stitching over the top of it. Again, it's the same thing where I'm not going to care if there's a little bit of a white line there, just temporarily, because there will be stitching on top of it. You know what I mean? So the first thing I'm going to do is actually get all of this marked. Now they don't show circles on here, but the way that I mark my pleats is, again, get my little scrap, and for my size I put a circle at the very bottom of the line and at, oh, just pick an arbitrary point but stick with it. I'm going to say about a 1/4 inch down, okay? And I'm going to do that for all of them all the way across, and then come back. You didn't even see that. Here they are right there. And then come back and fill those in. Okay, so I have a 1 hole down at the very bottom of my line and one about a 1/4 inch in. And I'm going to do that for my size all the way across. Actually, just because this is corduroy, I am folding the fabric back first so that when I do all of my punching, like I said, the pressure shows up in corduroy. So just the pressure of pushing on here is going to make a mark. So since I don't want to have to deal with brushing that, and if you do brush it, you know, it will come off, I'm just going to go ahead and move my fabric out of the way, punch all of my little marks beforehand, and then fold the fabric back up underneath it and mark it with my pen. Okay, so in addition to marking all of these, for this stitching line, the way that it's easier for me is I also put a little circle right here, about a 1/4 inch down, and move this fabric out of the way. At the point where it starts to make this curve right here, okay, I'm going to put another dot just before it starts to make that curve. So if you're unsure where, just line up a ruler with the whole thing, and I can see right here is exactly where it starts to curve. So I'm going to put a dot right there. And that way I know to draw a straight line here, and then this large dot I'm punching out in the very center, and this one here. So then I will know to draw a curve from here to here using some kind of a curve template, which I will show you when I get to that point. And so, yeah, that's how I mark all of this. Oh, and up at the very front, I want a dot too, to mark the top of that fold line. And there's a couple dots over by the pocket placement, so there's dots everywhere. So this comes in extremely handy. So now that all of those are punched out, get my pen and just start drawing circles. So this one off by itself here, that's for pocket placement. You know, it is what it is. All of these, I'm just going to draw the top and the bottom, and then come back just like for my dart and connect them. You know, it really would do me good if I read the instructions before I record, because now take everything I said about marking and marking on the right side and how I mark for pleats and just throw that out the window, because these are not pleats. These are pointless darts, okay? So because you're sewing them like a dart, you mark it on the wrong side. So, you know, just treat all of that as a little dissertation on the pros and cons of marking pins and everything like that. And even though I have them all marked on here, I am going to go ahead, iron it right now to erase them and transfer all my markings to the wrong side, and I will be right back. Okay, so now that I have those dots marked on my wrong side, as I do, I'm going to come back and again draw my little stitching line to connect them, just so I can see that space a little bit clearer. All right, I hope you can kind of see those. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and pin these just like I'm pinning darts. A dot pin down in the bottom, first side, up in the bottom, second side, and again where I drew my two little dots up here about 1/4 inch down, do the same thing. Pull these pins all the way through so I have a nice crease up here on top, okay, and then just anchor them in and go on to the next one. So there's going to be about 1/2 inch between each one. Which is going to make it very tight if you're pinning them all across the way. I'm probably going to do one, sew it, and then the next one, sew it, and just do it over at my sewing machine, because if I have too many pins here, it's just going to be one big mass of pins, okay? So like I have this one here, and I will start, actually flip it over this way. I'm going to start up here, come down to the bottom, back stitch at the bottom dot, take these pins off, make the next one, and go like that all the way across. Once I get all the way across, are we stay stitching? Yes, we are. So once I get all the way across, I am doing another row of stay stitching at the very top at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so I just got one of them sewed, so I wanted to show you what it's looking like here. This is the outside. This is the side, this is the center, here's the crotch line here, okay? So on the back, what I need to do is press all of these towards, oh, where do they want me to press it towards? I believe it's towards the center. Yes, okay, so they want you to, this is my crotch line here, press all of these over towards the center very carefully, and I'm probably going to extend it so that where it kind of naturally wants to continue that fold, maybe for a few inches below it, just to try to get that set in nicely, so that that way when I'm wearing it at the bottom of my little darts, I don't have a poof. I have more of a gradual coming to fullness at a lower point down here. So let me go ahead and get all of this ironed. Once it's all ironed and pressed towards the center, then do my 1/2 inch seam allowance stay stitch across the top. All right, so back here at the table, I've been gone for a few hours on a fabulous sewing machine type of errand. And so got another machine to do on my other channel, my Promethean sewing machine channel, so that'll be fun. But I need to draw this line, this curved line, onto my left front, okay? This line here, I draw on my right front, this one on my left front. So I have my pocket template thing, you know. You might need, if you don't have one of these, you might need to come up with an alternative curve. It looks about like the size of a small cup or something. But I just try to find a curve that somewhat matches that. And it looks like this one is it. So I can take this curve and place it between those two dots. It's very, very hard to see with all this glare in this light, but I can place it right here and then trace around the curve. And now I have, oh, I don't even know if you can see. For some reason the lighting's doing weird things right now. I think it's my battery. I think my battery's running low. Let me go change the camera battery out. Maybe we'll have better light. Put a fresh battery in. Oh, who knows, who knows. But right here, if you can kind of see, if I hold it up to the light just right, you might be able to see I have a curved line going right there. Anyhow, it's there, and I'm going to go on to my next step. So before I actually start putting on pockets and everything, I'm going to serge all the way around both of my front pieces, just like I did with my back ones, just to keep it from, misbehaving later, but I'm not going to be serging at the very top since that's going to be in the waistband just from here down and back around. You may have noticed I have not clipped any notches yet, and I am going to do that right now. I have to put my pocket on, so I'm going to clip this little notch here and up here. You know what, I'm not going to clip that one for right now, I'll tell you why later. But on each side I'm going to clip a little notch right there, and I'm going to be getting my piece number 11 pocket piece, which is right here. And before I do anything, I'm going to go ahead and go serge around both of these pieces. There are 2 of them that I cut out. Okay, so I've got both pocket pieces serged around. I gave them a light press, because you need to do that after serging around a curve sometimes. I've got my little notch marked. So I'm going to take the piece that goes along with this pocket, match up these 2 notches here, and carefully match it up. One of my sides wants to curl a bit here. Okay. And then to sew it on, so I'm going to go on for 5/8 of an inch all the way up. Now on your pocket piece, there is a dot here and a dot down there. I'm not putting those on right now because at this point they're a little bit self-explanatory. They're just showing where 5/8 of an inch hits. And as long as I make sure when I'm pinning it on, that everything is lining up right, then I am good. So starting at the very top of my pocket, coming 5/8 from this side all the way down to the edge on both of my front pieces. All right, so my pocket is sewn on in the correct place because my notch is lining up. This is lining up down here. This hits where that waistline curve is. So now what I need to do is understitch my pocket. So opening it up like this with the seam allowance under the pocket side. Okay, I'm going to come back and understitch it, which means I'm going to stitch it just on the pocket side of my seam right here, about 1/8 of an inch in over this side, and I'm going to be stitching through the pocket and both seam allowances. It's going to go right here. Okay, so I hope you can see this line of stitching right here is my understitching. Okay, so on the wrong side it looks like I have 2 rows going down here, and that understitching is going to help because now I can just turn that pocket to the inside, and it's going to want to curve it and curl it and pull all that under, so I have a beautiful edge to my pocket. I don't have any seam lines showing or anything, and it's nice and sturdy. So that's the beauty of understitching. I'm going to go ahead and do it to the other side front now. Okay, so now I need to get this pocket piece. This is the one that is exposed, and I clipped my notches and punched out the holes for these 2 dots. I'm going to go ahead and serge all around both of these pocket pieces, iron them, and then come back and color in where my dots are, because otherwise, they will disappear when I iron. Okay, so I have colored in my little dots on here. Where are they? Here's one down here and the other one up here. Okay, so with this pocket piece just kind of laid to the inside, this is the wrong side of my front pants, I'm going to start matching up at this corner up here, And put a pin down here at this little inside corner. And another one up here at the top. Okay, so my stitching is going to start up here, come down, over, and then I need to trace it all the way around the bottom of this pocket. Okay, and then ending up, matching up this bottom corner of both of these pocket pieces. Okay, and what I do on this side, I'm of course going to do the same on the other side. So when I come to stitch, I'm going to stitch all the way around up here, turn at this corner and come in. Now right here is where we're going to be transitioning from going around the pocket to the upper pants itself. So you know what, let me pull this off so I can make sure this is nice and straight. And I didn't mark this notch earlier because it looks like this part stretched out maybe about, what is that, like 1/4 inch or so right there, probably while I was stretching it to do my darts and ironing it and everything. So I'm just kind of leaving that for right now because it's not going to match up exactly, but that's okay. When everything is done, if something needs to be trimmed, I can trim it. For right now, I'm just going to leave it like that. But I'm going to stitch looking at this side. So what I need to do is up here at this top part, instead of 5/8 of an inch, I'm only going to go 3/8. All right, so 3/8 here because I want this seam to be inside of these. All right, so these are my pocket seams I did before, my main one, my understitching one. I'm going to be coming in just inside of the understitching one and then turning and coming over. All right. And then this part, I can do it 5/8 of an inch, or honestly, whatever I want this to be. This isn't going to matter so much, but this up here, they're saying that they want this upper pocket part to be at 3/8. Okay, so at this point, this dot, which you can barely see, it's right here, okay? I need to match up that dot, I'm on the outside here, with the edge of my pocket. And get this bottom part here all lined up nice and smoothly. So I'm going to do that, put a couple pins in. And I did another dot up here, and it's right there, and I can tell it is matched up. Now, I'm trying for the life of me to figure out why they wanted you to do this at 3/8, and I don't really see why, because I'm having to kind of fold it over a little bit when I get it lined up. It doesn't really give a good reason why, so I don't know. I'm just going to kind of fold it so that it looks appropriate. This is about 1/8 of an inch fold right there, so you know, is what it is at this point. And I'm going to go ahead and pin it across here. And so looking at it now, you can kind of see what I was talking about, how this is the top of my pocket, and then this up here a little higher is the top of my waistband. I do have stay stitching there. So just to make my life easier, from about this point, I'm going to kind of blend it in so that when I sew on my waistband, it'll all be one continuous length. And there's my quick and easy fix. I believe that we are supposed to be basting this. It says to baste this part down here. This part up here, they're just assuming it's going to be holding its own. I'm going to go ahead and, you know what? I got to tell you, this makes no sense to me. I'm going to come back in here and stitch this part at 5/8 also, because that's where it wants to hold itself. So on this side where this main seam is on my pocket here, I'm just going to continue that, which is at 5/8 all the way up, and I think that that will lay a lot better on that front. Alrighty, so I restitched this, and that lays a whole lot better. I need to iron it still so you can see my wrinkles, but trust me, that lays a whole lot better to do that at 5/8 also. And while I was over there, I just machine basted this little pocket corner down. So I'm going to lightly press this and do the same thing to the other side front. I'm about to get started working on the fly, and I needed to mark this dot anyway, but putting this on here, the top of my pants is the right height. I'm wondering if that pocket was just a little bit shorter. Either way, it doesn't matter. The main thing to make sure is if you do trim anything, that this point, the two pieces, are still the right height, okay? So right now I need to mark this larger circle on the outside, and I'm just going to draw a line where my notch is. It's just a couple inches below it right here, and what I need to do is stitch at 5/8 of an inch from here to here. Now I'm going to change my thread. I have a little bit of a stronger thread that has a little bit of elastic in it. I only have black and white. I'm going to use black, but I feel like that's a good safe thread to use when I'm making anything that has to do with a crotch. So what that means is the top stitching, I'm going to change out my thread again when it's time to make my little top stitching, so it is the lighter gray color. But other than that, I'm going to be using my black, somewhat stretch enhanced thread for everything else here. So at this point I need to shorten my zipper, and this pattern calls for a 9-inch zipper. Okay, so if I lay it out, 9 inches is going to end approximately right here. Okay, so what I'm going to do first, before I do anything, is with a zigzag stitch, a wide one in place, I'm just going to put some tacking stitches right at that point so that when I go to cut it, it's not going to come open. Okay, so excuse me, here it is. That's where my little thread tack is. And you can see on this zipper from where their little end piece is, it looks like about 1 inch or so that they leave hanging off the bottom part there. So we're going to try to kind of duplicate that. So at about 1 inch below that point, I'm just going to cut my zipper, and then I'm going to cut up, not all the way, stopping about 1/4 inch away, and trim out some of this, the coils, but leaving the tape hanging down, okay? And just to make it neat, I'm going to pull that little leg over to the side. This is on the back side. Pull this little leg over here. So from the front, I have like a little bit of a triangle there. Tuck this under here. And while I'm holding it, I'm just going to run some stitches back and forth along here, and maybe a little bit more zigzag over the bottom of this just to hold it in place. So that's kind of like what it looks like. Well, it is what it looks like. You know, some zigzagging going up the very center, and then I stitched straight stitch like a triangle around it. And just to make sure everything stays where it's going to, I'm just going to put a little bit of my clear nail polish over these threads so that they don't want to come undone at some point in the future. So as soon as that glue dries, we should be good. So this is the zipper I'm going to be using in my pants. And we've got this sewed here. So remember, on the fly, there's a fold line to do on the right side. That's what I need to work on now. Now on the pattern, the fold line is here. If I measure it, it is 3/8 of an inch in from the cut edge. So let's see here, which side am I dealing with? I'm dealing with this side here because this one has my fly drawn on it. Okay, so what I need to do is fold this in 3/8 of an inch and press it. And I'm just going to put a couple pins here to guide it and get it started. And it looks like it's going to be just about like that. So I'm going to go ahead and press this. Okay, so this is the that same right side. It's pressed and I have the right side up now. And I'm going to be putting in my zipper, so of course I am going to be using my double-sided water-soluble basting tape. And I am looking on the instructions, and we need to make sure that when we set the zipper, we set it at the proper height over here. So the diagrams for putting in the fly, let me just show you. It's hard to go by the diagram because here it looks like the top of their zipper tape is set lower, okay? And here it looks like the top of their zipper tape is the same height as the cut edge. But here it shows above the zipper stop top, you fold it down. So what they've said in their words is that you need to make sure that the bottom stop, this part right here of your zipper, matches up with the bottom dot, which is this dot right here of the pattern, okay? And then I guess the top will just figure itself out. They're assuming that all zippers are different, I suppose. So what I'm going to do is get a piece of my tape, and I'm putting it on the right side of this zipper. And I'm putting it up to the point right here where the top of my zipper is. Okay, so this has a paper backing on it. I need to go ahead and pull my paper backing off now. So I have my paper backing removed, so it's all sticky now. So right here is my lower dot. So I'm going to place that lower dot in line with the stop on my zipper. And I'm placing the folded edge fairly close to my coils. I want to have enough room that I can pull my zipper up and down and it's not going to get caught in the fabric, but I don't want it too far away, you know? And this tape is fabulous because you can just kind of press it down and it's going to stay nice and straight. So that's about the placement I have. I have maybe about 1, maybe 2 millimeters between the coils and the fabric, but that's because I want to have the freedom to zip this up and down easily. What they say to do now is to baste closely to the edge of this. Since I used basting tape, I am not going to baste it with thread. This is fine, you know, so I'm just going to set this aside for a minute. I need to get out this piece, which is called the right fly. Fly, baby, fly. And I need to fold it right sides together, like this, and sew across the top and this lower edge. And they do not say a specific seam allowance. No, yes they do. They want you to sew it at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. So let me go ahead and do that. 3/8 here, 3/8 here, and then I will clip the bulk out of the corners, flip it right side out, and press it. Okay, once I got that done, I just came back and ran serging across the raw edges. So my little piece here is ready to go. Now, they're going to want you to baste again. Again, I'm going to use my basting tape. So what this is our little guard, so nothing gets zipped up that should not be zipped up here. Okay, and I need to look for my placement. Where is my placement dot? I'm assuming that the top of this has to be at least 5/8 of an inch down, so I am going to start it up here where the top of my little zipper head is, okay? That should give me plenty of room for my facing and everything up here. Okay, so what I'm going to need to do is along this row, I'm going to use my tape again and just run a row of this tape all the way up to the top. Trim that and pick the backing paper off again. So the small dot, which is the point where this little bar tack is here, is 5/8 of an inch up from the bottom. Okay, and I sewed this at 3/4, so basically just above about that high up from the bottom is where my dot will be, okay? What I'm going to be doing is, well, I can't do it this way, but basically about this high up, I'm going to match this with where this bottom bar tack is, okay? So, and I'm also matching up the raw edges. That's going to put it a little high up on top. You know what? Instead of matching it up at the bottom, like the instructions say, I'm going to match it up at the top. The main thing for me is to get all of the raw edges in line. So the raw edges from the zipper tape, from all of this here, that's what I'm lining up with the raw edge of this. And just pulling it all the way down. So now it's all stuck together. It's going to stay where I want it to, okay? So now I can come from the right side and permanently sew all the way down. So let me go change to a different foot on my sewing machine. Before I stitch it, what they want me to do is fold the top of my tape down. It looks like this in the diagram, which is odd to me. I'm going to fold it out like that, okay? So it's kind of at a 90-degree angle. So let me take you over to my sewing machine, which is Pearl, and show you how I'm going to be stitching this. Okay, so I am using Pearl today. We do love our Pearl. She is our sweetheart. And I'm using a narrow foot instead of a zipper foot. It's just very, very small. If I line anything up on the outside edge, it's about a 1/16 of an inch seam allowance if I line it up there. So that really comes in handy for me. So let me go ahead and move the camera closer. Okay, so hopefully you can see that and I can work around that camera. So what I'm going to do, again, my tape, I'm reaching over the top of the camera right here. My tape is folded over to the side like this, okay? And then I'm going to place this tape straight up. Try to keep that tab out of the way, and I'm going to start sewing up at the very top. Back stitch, and here we go. And keep on going. There you go. Isn't that so much easier than having to baste all of those different layers individually? So now if I clip this, and I should be able to unzip my zipper easily. Hang on a second. I should be able to unzip my zippers here. There it goes. I was holding on to the wrong part. So you see it goes up and down really nicely. I've got everything stitched in the back here. There you go, everything stitched in the back as it should be. And I am ready to go and start working on the left side of my fly. All right, so the next part is going to be dealing with this fly facing, which needs interfacing. And so I'm going to go ahead and cut out all of my interfacing for my facing pieces. The one I'm going to be using is this one. It's the one called Featherweight. To me, it feels like a medium weight, slightly crisp. I think it will do the job for this corduroy and for all of its purposes. So I'm going to go ahead and cut all of these pieces out, and I will fuse them all in one time. Okay, interfacing has been fused. So what they want me to do is finish the outside edge of this, and the way they want you to do that is to turn it under, you know, just a little bit, somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4, and then straight stitch down that edge. So I'm going to do that, just kind of turning it as I go and straight stitch all the way around to here. Not worrying about this side right now. Okay, so here it is, all stitched down. And while I was there, I just serged over this edge just to clean up where my interfacing was, you know, sticking out a little bit here and there. So now I need to go ahead and get my pants back up here and position this piece. Alright, so here's my pants. This is the side we just did all that stuff to. I'm just going to kind of fold it down and get it out of the way here. Let all of this be available. So on this piece, down here at the bottom, about 5/8 of an inch up, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and cut this hole so I can show you. So if I mark it on here, knowing that I already turned it up about 1/4 inch-ish, there's a dot that should be like right around there at this point, okay? That is what gets matched up at this same spot down here at the bottom. So I'm just going to place it there for a minute just to see how it lines up with everything at the top. Now this piece should go all the way up to the same cut level. The other one is shorter. Where am I? Here. This piece here is shorter, okay? This one goes all the way up. So when I was matching it up down there, it wasn't quite exact. So to me, it's safer to go ahead and match it up here. Okay, line up this edge, and that's where that is going to go. I'm going to be sewing it. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and draw a little dot. I can kind of feel where it is with my thumb, that level right there. That is the point where everything comes together, okay? I need to sew at 5/8 of an inch from this point all the way up to the top. Let me put a pin here and I'll show you. So this point here, trust me, this is just above, or that line that I drew is right where all of this stuff is, okay? So let me go ahead and sew from here all the way up at 5/8 of an inch. Okay, so now I'm going to need to understitch this, but they ask you to trim it first. So they don't say exactly how to trim, what to trim. I'm going to grade this thing. So my layer that has the interfacing on, I'm going to be trimming that, you know, fat 1/8 of an inch, almost 1/4 inch, all the way down. And the one above that, whoops, this did not get trimmed here. And the one above that, I am just going to trim off all of my serging. So that's kind of grading it so it's not going to be as thick here. Obviously, I'm not being too particular about it. Okay, now I need to understitch it. So with the seam allowances pressed out, just turning the fly facing over. So the fly facing is on top of all of these seam allowances. I'm going to understitch this down on the fly facing side of this seam. Okay, you can see here's the seam. I'm going to do it right about here, about 1/8 of an inch-ish in, you know, sometimes less, all the way up that seam. Okay, so I've got my fly facing understitched, everything is good there, and I have just come back and on the other side of my zipper tape I just put a row of my basting tape on there. You don't need to see me do that again. And on the instructions they want you to hand baste something, and I'm going to not, but because I'm using this tape, I think I can get away with it. So let me very carefully position this on the table so that nothing is going to fall. Now, I'm going to want to position this so that the edge of the front is going to be, I would say, about 1/8 to 1/4 inch in. So right about here. So if this is the edge of my zipper, I don't even know if you can see that. Can you see that? So if this is the edge of my zipper here, I'm going to want the edge of my fabric of my overlap to be about that far in. And I can, you know what, I'm going to draw a line just to make it obvious here. And yes, I know everything I said earlier about this pen. It will be okay. Well, I think I ran out of ink, so it won't be okay. Hang on just 1 second. Okay, so I am just going to chalk a line on here because my pen just ran out of ink and I don't feel like filling it up right now. Okay, so this line's just going to give me a very dusty look at where I want to go. So with this tape on there, let me raise you up a bit here. I'm going to carefully roll down my fly so that the top is going to match up here and the edge is covering up my yellow chalk line. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, if you get to this point and this is not perfectly straight, don't worry about it for right now. We can trim that even before we put the waistband on, okay? But yeah, for right now, to me, that looks pretty good. And I'm pressing it down so that it is sticking to the zipper where it needs to, okay? So now, if I flip this open like this, this zipper is glued to my fly piece that I just did here. So I think that the best way for me to do it without moving anything is just to put it on my sewing machine this way. Now I'm going to be looking at the back side of my zipper. I'm not seeing all of the coils here, but it's still good enough that I can make a nice seam all the way up. And again, I'm only sewing through my fly facing at this point, not through the front of my pants. So from the very bottom of my zipper tape all the way up, this zipper tape is staying up, okay? It's not getting folded, it's staying up all the way up to the top. Okay, so now that is sewn on. You can kind of see it here. There's the stitching line. It's on here. So at this point, I'm going to open my zipper just to make sure everything works, and it does. Yay. And I need to stitch this curved outline. What this stitch is going to do is just hold the facing to the front piece here. So I'm just going to stick some pins through here to hold it in place. My pen line where I drew it is very, very faint. Trust me, it starts here and comes all the way up. I could see it, but barely, so I know you can't. But I'm going to go ahead and hang on, one more pin. So when I'm pinning it, I'm only going through this part, okay? Keeping all of this stuff out of the way. And when I'm stitching it, I'm only stitching through this part too. Okay? So let me go ahead to my sewing machine, stitch it here, the curve, all the way up to the very top. Alrighty, so now we can see nice and bright. Here is that row of stitching I just made. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and zip up my zipper. And everything looks good. But what I'm going to do, because I like reinforced flies, is right here at the bottom, I'm going to do a little extra bar. Like on jeans, sometimes it's a very narrow zigzag that just goes maybe about 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch across. It just double reinforces so that your fly is not going to want to bust out the bottom of your zipper for some reason. So I'm going to go ahead and make that little bar tack. Okay, so all done. So yes, I have my little bar tack right there, and hopefully no one will be staring that close at the bottom of my zipper. If they are, God help them while I'm wearing it, you know. But I think that it looks pretty good. It is dark outside. It's about dinner time, so I am going to put this up on my dress form and I will see you in the morning. Okay, so welcome back. It is another day, and I think it's been a couple days since I worked on this, but my next step is to sew the inner pant leg seams. So this is kind of my last chance that I can put it up on a dress form so you can get a look at it. And I wanted to point out, look, this is extremely wide. It's kind of like having a very long, very full skirt, you know, with the whole secret pant thing going on here. But it's gonna hang pretty nice, I think. I like how these pleats or darts or whatever you want to call them, they're not too bulky. And when I turn it around, you know, it's just pinned, just several pieces pinned, but you kind of get the idea of how high this waistband is. Very high. But I think it's going to be okay. So at this point, I'm glad I did not extend or add any up here like I usually do in pants. So let me take it off of here and start pinning up that inner leg seam. All right, so I am just laying my front piece here. Here's my fly, face up, and my back pieces are still separate, but doing it one at a time, I can match these up. There is a notch in there, but I think it's actually just going to line up perfectly if I match the top and the bottom. Okay, sew this seam at 5/8 of an inch and then press that seam allowance open. And I need to do that for both of my inner legs. Okay, so now that these seams are in, what I need to do is sew up the rest of my crotch here. So I'm going to match up the center backs of my pant skirt thing. Match that up, match up this center seam here, right sides together, of course. Now up here by the fly, it's kind of folded. I'm just going to work with that. I don't want to actually clip anything right now, but I can see my seam. I don't know why there's a loop there, but my seam comes right here, okay? So that's what I'm tying into. So even though this is folded up here, where all that is, it's far enough away from this that I don't have to worry about it. So I'm going to go ahead and put another pin here. So what I'm going to be doing is sewing one seam at 5/8 of an inch. And again, I'm using my heavier, a little bit of stretch thread, you know, which is very good for crotches because, you know, if it's too tight and you bend over and you hear a thread pop, that's never fun. You don't want that. So I'm hoping that this thread, even though this is a huge pair of pants and that should not be an issue, you know, it helps. Peace of mind helps. So I'm going to sew it, okay, and then come back and I'm going to sew over that seam so I have an extra row of it just in this crotch area. Okay, so I will have one complete row and then a second one right here in this curve. All right, so let me see if I can get close enough. You can kind of see because I didn't match it up exactly, but I've got 2 rows of stitching going down there. And the instructions do not say to trim, they don't say to clip or anything, this whole area. And my fabric is so soft that I think that will be okay. Usually you do a second row. If you have a fabric that feels stiff, or you think that this is just going to be too much right here, that it's going to give you a wedgie and it's going to be terrible, what I would do is come back, do a second row of stitching about 1/8 of an inch inside of this one, and trim it a little bit closer to that second row of stitching, okay? That way you won't have as much bulk there. I don't think that I'm going to have any trouble, so I'm just going to leave it as is. So now I need to match up my side seams. All right, so I did press the seam allowance open just in this center back, you know, not all the way in the swoop, but just right here. So let me start by laying that right side up. And then I'm going to put my front on top of that so I can match up my side seams. But I've got a lot of fabric going on here. Hang on a second. This thing is starting to take on a life of its own. It's starting to remind me, oh my gosh, I can't even remember exactly which era it was. Was it the 70s where there were some pants that were really full, that were kind of like a skirt, you know? It's kind of giving me that same feel right here. I have no idea when I try it on how it's going to be, but that's what I'm feeling right now. So anyhow, I need to match up. There's a couple notches down this side. I need to match up my notches and everything. And then I'm going to sew it from top to bottom, you know, starting at the top as much as you can, because that way if something works out and it's not quite even when you get to the end, if it's on the bottom, you can just trim it because it's a hem, you know. But anyway, starting at the top, I'm going to sew it at 5/8 of an inch and then press these side seam allowances open. Okay, so over here at my ironing board, I wanted to show you for pressing these side seams open. I have a lot of fabric going on here, so I'm just going to get some of this out of the way. What I do is I get my big old seam roll, you know, from a previous video. If you need one, I have a video on how to make them. And just set that inside, and that way I can come back and press my side seam open, and it's not going to wrinkle up or crush anything underneath it. Once I get down to in the legs, well, that's easy just to spread them open, you know, but for up here, up where there's so much going on, I find that this seam rule, it works pretty good. I love this iron, but I don't like all of these hoses. They keep catching me up, you know, but you know, everything has its pros and cons. So anyhow, that's how I do it up here. And even though I do have a pocket here, so it's a little bit thicker, pressing it open is, I think, the way to go. So once I have all of that done up there with that seam roll, then I can just open all this up. It's kind of doubled down here, you know, but it's wide enough that I can go ahead and iron it, and I'm not going to be having to worry about making a crease on one of the sides or something. And I can tell you one other thing. I wish I had used a walking foot. Because it's a baby corduroy, it's not a huge amount of nap, but it's enough that by the time I got to the bottom of all of my seams, I'm off by about 1/4 inch, and that's just because the bottom feed dogs are feeding more than the top, and a walking foot would take care of that, you know, nappy fabrics. But it's not the end of the world. I'm just thinking, if I do this again, got to remember, put my walking foot on. Okay, so at this point, I have everything pretty much sewed. I don't have my facings on up here. But what I would suggest, and what I'm going to do, is try these on right now, because if I need to adjust the waist or something, it's very easy at this point, you know, just to take a little more in, let a little more out, and this seam allowance back here in the back, or even the side if you need to. But once you get the facing on, it's a little more difficult. So give me a moment. I'm going to try them on, see how it goes. Well, they fit, and they fit really well, and I cannot tell you how cute these pants are. I want you to see. I was going to turn the camera on to show you while I was trying them on, but I was having technical difficulties, so I did not, but you'll see them soon. So what I need to start working on now is my back. So I need to make sure that I am placing everything on the correct side. So I need to go ahead and clip my notches, because that is important. The back is one long piece. You have a separate piece for the right and a separate piece for the left. So let me just go ahead and get all of these clipped, and matched up. And just to make sure you lay them out right, because I've screwed this up on other patterns before, they do give you a handy dandy guide on which piece goes where. So this is my center back, which is 18. So I'm going to be putting 16, and the side that has the notches, the other side is my center front over here. And they're kind of at a slight angle, so if it looks a little bit off center, well, it's not really off center, it's just not at a 90-degree angle, you know. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this one. The same thing with 17, I'm going to be pinning it over here. Sewing these seams at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, okay, and then pressing these seam allowances open. Okay, so it kind of curves like this, where the side that has the notches clipped in it is at the top of the curve. It's like a frowny face, okay? The bottom of that is where we're going to be turning up just a little bit and running a straight stitch along it just to finish this whole side off. But before you do that, over here on your piece number 16, they want you to turn it in 5/8 of an inch and press it. So if I can mark it clearly, then I can see exactly where I need to fold it, and I'm going to go over to my ironing board and press this first. And I believe that is the order. No, they want you to do that second. So fold up and stitch this first, and then at 5/8 of an inch, once this is all stitched down and that edge is nicely finished, then you're going to turn this over and press it in at 5/8 of an inch like that. And do we stitch it? Well, they want you just to stitch the bottom when you sew straight across. I'll probably do it in 2 separate steps. Okay, so you can hopefully see I've got it stitched, just a line of straight stitching all the way across. So where that 5/8 inch mark is on my piece number 16 over there, I'm going to fold that. And it looks like they just want you to re-stitch it on the bottom, so I'm just going to run a quick second little row of stitching over that, just to tack this bottom edge down and leave this top part up here open. All right, so I've got my facing down here. Move some stuff out of the way, and I'm going to start off by matching my side seams of my pants to the side seams of my facing pieces. And make sure I pin on both sides of the seam so that I can anchor down these seam allowances and make sure that they stay nice and flat and open as I sew over them. And once I get that done, there's a couple notches here right next to the center back. Get those matched up and pin straight across here. Okay, so now moving towards the front. On the side that has your fly stitching on it, where the zipper tape goes all the way to the top, that is going to match, it looks like. I just glanced at the instructions and realized that they did not want you to do that outside stitching on the fly until you got way down to this step. Well, I already stitched out here, but I have not attached the under part, so I might just stitch it twice, you know? I think that will be fine because I still need to deal with all of this down here. Okay, so this is the one that has the stitching here. Open it out so it's like this. All right, this is the front of my pants on the right side. I have this totally opened up like this. I'm going to take this end of my facing and match it up with the outside edge here and pin that. Okay, and I need to pin all of this in here, make sure that I have my seam allowance where this pocket is going towards the front so that that will lay nice and flat, and get all of this pinned straight across here. So now over here on this side that has our little guard and everything that is set lower, okay, on this side here, where this is folded, that folded edge is going to match up with the folded edge here, okay? I need to pin that so those both stay folded closed, and go ahead and pin across here. Still the same thing, making sure this seam allowance from this pocket is going the other way, is going towards the front. Okay, I want my pocket to look like this on the inside. Okay, so now that I have it all pinned, I'm going to sew it at 5/8 of an inch from the very edge here to the very edge here. I just realized this makes absolutely no sense. And so I went back and looked at the directions. It says open zipper on left front, open out left fly facing, like we did. Pin end of left front fly facing, right sides together, stitch. That's as far as I got. And I was like, stitch, okay, I'm gonna stitch the whole thing. Well, no, that does not work because you end up with this, which, you know, makes no sense. But while I'm here, what I wanna show you is you wanna make sure that your seams up here at the same level, and they are. So what I'm going to do Just get my little scissors here, and where this is, I'm just going to clip this seam for just a little bit above where this fly is stitched here, because I think that I know what they're trying to get at, but their wording in the instructions was not the clearest. So let me pull this out and I'll show you what I think it is that they're trying to say. Okay, so now pretend I have not sewn this upper seam at all, okay? Pretend it's just totally loose here and everything is good. Opening this up this way, fold this over, and stitch here. Don't stitch up there, stitch here. You know, we all make mistakes. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this. It looks like they don't tell you the seam allowance, so I'm going to assume it is 5/8 by looking at their little diagram. It looks like it's close to 5/8, so, and it looks like it goes all the way from top to bottom. Okay, so I actually stitched it at a 1/2 inch seam allowance because 5/8 is exactly where this is, and I did not want to risk going over that. So now that this is done, now I need to, it says, turn the fly to the outside. So here's my fly here. Flip it so it is to the outside. This makes no sense the way they are showing us this thing, because this outside edge is not taken care of then. Okay, I just figured out what my problem is. My problem is that I stitched this ahead of time. So yes, this is an issue. So what I need to do is very carefully, after I get a cup of coffee, cup of tea, you know, just chill for a minute, I'm going to carefully pull out this row of stitching that I put in earlier when I was doing the fly. This down here is fine. I'm not touching that, just this row of stitching. So if you're following along, when I'm doing this earlier, don't put in this row of stitching at that point, okay? Because that's why this isn't working. So let me pull out all of this stitching and get a cup of tea, and I will be right back. I forgot to turn on my microphone, so I'm going to try to do voiceover for this whole part. So at this point, I have picked out the top stitching just for several inches there, and I've picked out about 4 inches of that front fly area. And what I'm showing you is where that stitching line is that I put in earlier at about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. If you look at the back side, that lines up. So that's where I had my aha moment. So what I'm going to need to do is, now that I have that fly opened up, and it's open all the way now because I have that stitching out, I'm just going to be sewing the very edge at that same 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm showing you that I pulled out that much stitches, okay? So stretching it over because it's going to look like the facing is too short. It'll work out, okay? Matching it up, sewing that at a 1/2 inch seam allowance first. All right, so right now what I'm showing you is that I sewed that 1/2 inch seam allowance there. 5/8 would work too, just saying. 5/8 would work too. But if I fold it at that fly edge, the facing is going to fit now, whereas before it looked way too short. So what you need to do is fold it back inside out, but the edge is going to be at the edge of the fly, not at our seam line that we just did. The seam line I just did is in about 1 inch where my thumb was, okay? So what I need to do now is pin that top row all the way across, or in my case, up to the point where I pulled stitching out earlier. And I need to sew that top at 5/8 of an inch straight across. Okay, so that stitching is in, and I'm going to show you that if I flip it right side out now, it's going to line up and the world is a better place. But it's not ready to flip yet because we need to take some bulk out. So getting it situated here, I'm going to need to take bulk out of the corners and grade the top. So the first thing I'm doing is cutting at a diagonal, leaving about 1/8 of an inch from where I cut down to the stitching. And then in the layer that is interfaced, I'm just going to separate those two layers and just cut the interfaced facing layer at the same, about 1/8 of an inch-ish seam allowance, so that I have a graded amount of bulk, so it won't be too much of a seam allowance there. So I'm just going to cut this all the way across the top of that facing. So now that that is done, I can turn it right side out and try to poke out my corners so I have a nice sharp little corner there. And I can find something to poke with. There we go. I'm going to use the corner of my ruler for some reason. I'm just going to be able to fold the facing down and get a nice top edge. We are going to be needing to understitch this, however. So before we finalize everything, what I need to do is push the seam allowance up towards the facing. Oh, looks like I'm going to try to zip it up again, because you never know. Oh, I wanted to show you that the top is still in line, because that's important, because there is no waistband. So you want to make sure that the top of your zipper on both sides is in line, and mine is, so that's a good thing. You know, we're looking for positives at this point. I'm telling you that if yours is not in line at this point, you can adjust your stitching. Hopefully you haven't graded it yet if you need to adjust it, but you just take a peek at that because it'll bother you later. Okay, so unzipping my pants, I'm going to show you about the understitching here, hopefully. So what I'm going to do is open it up, and I'm going to be able to get my presser foot in probably about 1.5 inches or 2 inches from the corner. I'm going to be pressing all the seam allowances towards the facing, and I'm going to be stitching it with a straight stitch at about 1/8 of an inch on the facing side all the way down. I just realized that my microphone has not been on. Oh, I hate that. That's okay. We'll just pick it up from here, and I will do voiceover later. You will see. So at this point, I have my facing understitched, which is that row of stitching you see there. It's very important. Make sure you don't skip understitching. And I have it folded to the inside. So what I did first was matched up my side seam, so the bottom of my facing seam is in line with the stitching the seam of my pants. Okay, do that for both of the side seams first, and then I also have a pin at my seam allowances and one at each dart in the back, and everywhere I have a pin I'm going to be whip stitching, so that's why I have so many here. Up in the front, I have this whole pocket right here, that little cutout squarish thing. So I'm going to be whip stitching it from this seam allowance only through the pocket layer all the way across to this point. Okay, that's going to keep this piece from wanting to fall down, anchor this down nicely. And so up here I will also be whip stitching it, and I have the edge of my facing lined up with the stitching line here of my little fly guard piece. Okay, this side you don't need to worry about that because it is stitched down. So I'm going to go ahead and get a needle and thread and stitch all of those places, and I will be back in a bit. Alright, so I got it all whip stitched together, and I'm not liking this. It's like, it's just laying flat on my table, so I don't know for sure that it's not hanging correctly, but it just seems a little bit off right there. So I think what I'm going to do is come inside and pull out some of my whip stitches. I still want to catch the very corner of my pocket piece here so it doesn't fall down. but I'm not going to catch it to the facing. I think I'm just going to whip stitch it to the actual pleated area. Okay, so for example, here, I don't want this corner of this pocket to just fall down. That would be bad in my opinion. So instead of stitching this to it, because I think that might be what's making this hang a little oddly right here, what I want to do is just up here in this corner area where all of these pleats are, I'm just going to do a couple little stitches just to tack it to the back of a couple of these pleats so it doesn't go all the way through, but that'll keep this corner from wanting to fall all the way down. And then just leave this part open. So I have it attached at my side seam and up here in the front, but I'm actually leaving this part unattached here. All right, so now that that is done, I need to come back and stitch this top part here. Let's say that you did not do this ahead of time. Now is the time, but when you stitch it, make sure you're not catching this yet, okay? That's tucked out of the way and that you're just stitching this side. Once this is stitched, then you'll come back and reinforce this one over here at the bottom, but not yet. So I'm going to go ahead and change my thread out so I can do my stitching up here to continue my curve, and I will be right back. Okay, so I'm pulling my pants inside out so you can see this next step a little bit better here. So I have this sewed, okay? That long curvy seam is all sewed in. Now this needs to get attached. So I'm actually going to zip up my zipper a little bit of the way here, and it's just the bottom area that I need to stitch together. And I want to make sure that where I stitch is below, and here's where I did that little reinforcement stitch. You know, if you didn't do that, you won't have that. But I need to go ahead and run some stitching right here. Now, it's going to be a little bit difficult because I've got so much stitching going on there. And let me just show you. Let me show you what they're talking about here. On the instructions, they want you to just sew from the outside edge all the way to their dot, which is right here. Okay, coming in this way. It would have to be underneath where this seam is because that's where everything is pinned together. So here's what I'm going to do. This piece is to make sure that nothing gets caught in the zipper. You know, you don't want anything getting caught in your zipper, so when this is folded over, you want this to be folded over too. I am not going to stitch all the way over here because I've got reinforcement and everything that would make it hard to stick under a sewing machine right there. What I am going to do is stitch it from about this point at the top of the curve down to the point where here's where my curve is sewed here, to the point where it's feasible for me to, which is right about here, okay? If I sew that, this isn't going to fly open, okay? That's going to hold it in. So I'm just going to go to my machine and do this little row of stitching. It's only about 1 inch, but it's good enough to hold what needs to be held. You know what I mean. All right, so with that done, here, I'll show it to you really quick. It's just that little bit of stitching right there. All I have to do now is hem the pants. So it's going to be very basic. What I'm going to do is fold the raw edge under so that I've got, that is too big, so that I've got, you know, like I said, part of it is a little uneven, somewhere between 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch, depending on the side. These pant legs are so wide, if I'm slightly uneven, no one will ever know. But I'm going to fold that up and press it like that. And then once I have that pressed, with that edge folded up, then I'm going to come back and fold it up 1 inch for a nice 1 inch hem. that's going to look like that all the way across. And I am going to be machine stitching this, so once I have it pressed, you know, pressed under, pressed up 1 inch, I'm just going to do a straight stitch straight across there. We have volume. Okay, so welcome. It's actually too cold outside. I opened the door to go out and it's not just cold, it's super windy. So I thought that would be nightmarish with microphones. So we're inside. It's another fireside chat kind of ending here. So pants, very cute, very comfortable, all that. I can say that those instructions for the facing and the fly were a little vague, but you know, we made it work. So if you have trouble with it, don't feel alone, because it's a club at this point. I should have extended my pants that extra inch. I'm very high-waisted, and usually I give myself an extra inch in there, and I didn't on these because they looked so big and so tall that I couldn't imagine. Well, putting them on, yes, I can wear them and everything, but I think that they would be a little bit more comfortable for my body if I did lower that at some point. So, you know, you live and learn, but they are definitely very wearable the way they are. Very comfortable. I like them. I think that the hardest part was that fly and facing, you know. But once you get past that, I think if you just take your sweet time and get through it one step at a time, it'll be okay. The fabric that I'm using, this corduroy, it worked pretty well. I just want to show you, even though it is corduroy, these pleats are not really bulky. They are laying really flat, so I do like that. And the zipper does come all the way up to the very top. There's no hook and eye, no button, no nothing up there. It's just the zipper, and it worked really well. So yeah, I'm happy with them. I really like them. So hope you enjoy this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Living my bucolic life, free healthy city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I could pick some spin and move the horses into the barn, then time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful white houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.